Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on miamighostchronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind the scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Today I am super thrilled with the guest that I have, and I know you guys are going to be thrilled too, absolutely, because this is somebody that's, like I say, has a foot in both worlds. Kind of the world of the paranormal, but also in the world of hard facts. And this gentleman's name is Greg Lawson. And Greg has spent much of his adult life exploring strange places, from the first Russian colony in Three Saints Bay, Alaska, to the pyramids of Egypt. He's also explored several paranormal hotspots in over 40 countries. So we're going to be asking him about that, absolutely. He is a career law enforcement officer with over 26 years of experience, and he also served 10 years in various branches of the military. He's worked as a mental health investigator and as a child abuse, sex crimes, and homicide detective. So that's the part about the hard facts. He has a master's degree in education from Texas State University, where he concentrated his studies in complex adaptive human systems. And he also specializes in investigative procedures and teaches these skills to Texas law enforcement officers. He's an international lecturer and the author of 2 fictional novels, The Disorient Express, I like that title, and The Carry-On, and 1 satirical horror manual titled Zombie Advocacy. His newest books is Detecting Paranormal, an advanced guide to paranormal research and evaluation. So, how are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing well. I think I need to shorten that bio a little bit.
No. Leave that exactly where it's at. Leave that exactly where it's at.
Yeah,
This is the truth. This is what you've done and what your background is. And this just gives people a little bit of an idea, of flavor of
right.
where you come from, where you spring from. And I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests, which is obviously, like I said, it seems like you had a foot in both worlds. You had the paranormal, maybe because of, I don't, and that's what I'm going to ask you, personal experiences, maybe as a kid, but then you had to deal with also with hard facts,
Right.
because of the type of work that you do. So, what did you ever have any experiences as a child?
Well, yeah, as a very young child, I was about 5, and I was at home. Obviously, it was in the evening time, and I was
Mm-hmm.
watching one of the 3 channels on TV at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there were just
And
3 channels. Yeah.
yeah, and Frankenstein, the original movie, was coming on. And
Okay.
I wanted to watch Frankenstein. My mother, of course, said I couldn't watch Frankenstein, and I, of course, then turned and, being the youngest of 4 kids, threw a temper tantrum and cried on the floor and stuff, and of course got my way. My mother said, "Okay, so you want to watch Frankenstein? Okay." And so she went and got some Jiffy Pop popcorn and a little, I don't know, some sort of orange drink, I think it was.
Uh huh.
And I sat there and I watched Frankenstein, and that messed me up for years. Yeah,
Really.
and yeah, and
So
it's
she
really
gave
funny
you what?
because
It's like, here you are. Okay.
yeah, that night I had this dream, and now I say this in jest, but I'm a recovering Catholic.
Oh,
So
there. I'm on one of
when
those
I
too.
was yeah, when I was growing up, that was one of the. I mean, that's what my foundation was built in, was the Holy Ghost, and the and just everything that has to do with being Catholic. And so my godmother had given me a Sacred Heart picture of Jesus,
Okay.
which looks like Ted Nugent with his heart getting ripped out, you know? And
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. And it scared the hell out of me. You know, I would sit
Oh
there
my
and look at
God.
that thing in my room and his eyes would follow me and everything. And it was just creepy, right? Well, that night I had a dream, and I had a dream that the blonde lady was coming to get me. And I don't know what that means, but I
Okay.
was terrified. And that that was my first triggering mechanism of the paranormal. And when I lived in that house, it backed up to a military base.
Okay.
And I had had experiences as a child that I had to go to the restroom, and
Mm-hmm.
I was walking down the hallway, and I had to go through a little sitting area to get to the restroom, and these hands were coming out from under the bed and grabbing me.
Oh God.
Yeah, and so I remember that as vividly as I remember, petting my dog when I came home. And I don't know whether it's something that I just dwelt on. That it was did I say
Yes.
dwelled? Yeah,
Don't
I don't know
believe
if it
me.
was
I
one
get.
thing that
I would dwelt whatever on it if I would have seen something like that. Believe me.
I'm making stuff up, words apparently. So that was one of the founding things that really got me interested in the paranormal.
Okay.
And about a year later, I swear to this day, I saw a thunderbird. Now, I could have been
Really?
a really big buzzard, but I was up the street,
Okay.
and this bird came down over me and was swooping down pretty fast and came right over my head, and it was as wide as the street was. So and I really that was not a dream there. That was something that happened, and whether or not maybe my perspective as a child, as it was coming in fast or something, this is the adult in me talking, saying, well,
Right.
that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, and of course my brother tortured me, taking me through graveyards and stuff when I was 7 or 8.
Of
you know,
course. You were the
molded
baby of
my
the family,
thinking.
so
That's
it's
right.
like
That's right. Yeah, my brother used to pick me up. He was 17 when I was 5, and he had a
okay.
motorcycle, and he would pick me up and sit me on the gas tank of the motorcycle. We'd go, and he would go look for old graveyards. We'd go to old graveyards, and then we'd walk around and look at the tombstones and stuff. And then, of course, what's that? What's
Right.
that
Oh,
over
I can
there?
imagine
You
he
start-
must have been
yeah.
like, okay. But I bet you
Oh
every time
yeah.
he wanted to go, you'd be there right there because, of course, you
Yeah.
had your big brother to take care of you.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Those, I think, and it's really funny because I think sometimes there's a lost art of getting scared where kids, or you would get scared of simple stuff like that. A scary movie like Frankenstein or going through the graveyard.
Right.
But it was a good thrill. It wasn't like nowadays. I think some of the movies get a little bit too graphic as far as the scare or what they call the wow factor. So
Yeah. They have completely desensitized people.
yeah, they have
I,
they have.
I
And
remember
before
when.
they left more to your imagination, and now it's like,
Right. I remember when The Exorcist came out,
oh my God,
and
don't talk about
how it was all over the newspaper. It was front page news in Austin,
yes,
Texas. You know the
yes.
the the craziness of The Exorcist. And my wife and I, about I guess it's been about 10 or 15 years, they did a re-release, digitally
Mm-hmm.
mastered, and did a re-release of The
Director's cut or
Exorcist.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was out in the movie theaters. And so I told Lynn, hey, let's go see this. And so we went and saw it, and it was nothing but jeering and catcalling and people laughing, and just it was incredible, the desensitization of the
Yeah.
public through Michael Myers and
Oh yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street and Jason and everybody else. It's
Right. And it's like, and I remember, when that movie came out, I remember they were continuously running different stories about, churches being overrun. I mean, with the priests, like people saying, I'm
yeah,
possessed, and other people running out of the theater. I mean, people were like wigged out totally with this
they
movie
were.
when it came out.
Yeah,
I mean, really wigged out. Even adults. It wasn't even just teenagers, full grown adults.
Yeah.
We're having a hard time with that movie.
People were throwing up in the movie theater when she threw up the pea soup.
I know, and now
They,
it's like
that
people
was
is like, yeah, right, okay.
yeah. Nowadays people are just like, I've seen everything. People have been exposed since they were children. Now, from like maybe the
Mm-hmm.
'80s on forward, maybe a little '70s. But they've been exposed to just absolutely horrific images,
Yes. Yeah.
and it desensitizes you. It does.
Right. No, I remember when I was growing up. Yeah, they had all what I call the B slasher movies,
Oh
but
yeah,
they were like, like they were kind of like, the blood kind of. But nowadays, the slash, I don't even watch slasher movies because I
yeah,
don't. At this point, it's like, it's too graphic, it's too real. It's like,
right.
I just don't see the entertainment in it.
The
And like you
the
said, this is
movies
not
like
one movie.
Hostel.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's like I never saw that movie. It's like, why would I put myself like, and because it's too real, and I could tell myself all night long, it's just a movie, it's just a movie, but it's so realistic. I just don't see
right.
the entertainment in seeing a human being being tortured, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay, no, no, the sadists out there, they can go run and watch this movie, but no, I always liked it. Like I said, yeah, there's been scary movies and slasher movies, but they were so cheesy, for lack of a better
right.
word. It was like you knew. It was like, okay, you had your little thrill, your moment, like, oh, and then that was it. It's like it wasn't real, and you could tell it wasn't real. But nowadays, and this is the thing, with all jumping the shark, you're always wondering what are they gonna do to top that? Because, like you
Right.
said, the audiences nowadays are a little bit more jaded. And
Yes, for
it's
sure. Yeah.
so here, fast forward, you grow up, and did you ever have, as a teenager, adolescent, any other experiences, or what happened after that?
So I did, all through junior high, I did urban exploring and yeah, I guess rural exploring and old farms and the area that I grew up in around Rockdale, Texas, had a lot of Spanish occupation in the 1700s there.
Okay.
There's obviously a lot of Indian occupation also. So there's a lot of history there, and so my friends and I would go and hunt graveyards there and go look for the old Spanish missions out in the woods
Mm-hmm.
and swim in the river and all that. So the only things that I can really nail down, I guess, of what I would consider experiences were more along the metaphysical line of experiences, more along of an emotional feeling um,
Yes.
type experience, as opposed to actually seeing something or actually hearing something that I could not,
Right.
um, identify.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of what I did. And when I left Rockdale and I joined the military, I went into the Army and I got to be assigned up in Alaska, and I was down in Central America, and I was over in the North Africa and the Middle East.
Right.
And, every time we had liberty, we got some sort of leave and R&R. I was way away from the soldiers and I was way embedded into whatever the weirdness was in that area. So I would kind of try to do my research. And, back then we didn't have the internet. So you had to go to the library, and which is not a cool place to hang out. But,
Yeah.
that's where I would learn a lot of my stuff is out of Encyclopedia Britannica. What's the weird kind of stuff going on.
Right.
And so I would follow up with that, and then with the internet and everything else, it's just it's snowballed at this point.
Right.
So
Because people don't realize that the internet was not around. There was such a thing as an encyclopedia, which was they would put out an
right,
update once a year. Wow.
yeah, we were in Transylvania. I went to Ponary Castle.
Wow.
That's Vlad the Impaler, Dracula's
Mm-hmm.
battle castle. And so we went there with a bunch of friends, and we're up there, and it was just amazing. And you're looking over the valley, and you're imagining all this stuff, and his wife. They had told his wife incorrectly that he was slain in battle in one of the battles, and so she went and threw herself from the wall
Okay.
and committed suicide. And he wasn't dead at all. He had survived the battle, and he returned back to celebrate with his wife, and who was dead at that point. But the interesting thing is me as I, I, I call myself, a paranormal detective,
Okay.
but I look at the things, and in that case, the legend is she threw herself from the wall into the river.
Okay.
Well, she would have had to have turned into a bat and flown over there because it's about a quarter mile
He's
away.
like, yeah,
So
all right. The river didn't move that much.
no, it didn't move that much. So, and it's way up on a mountain. I mean, it's 1,480 steps just to get up there.
Wow.
And so we go up there and we're looking around, and they have some people on spikes, out there as far as impaled, that's
Right.
just kind of a little Hollywood stuff going on. And we all kind of gathered in this one area, and the walls are all busted down, and it's some of the towers are still in place, but the tops of them are all busted off. There's no roofs or anything. And we're in the back of what would be the castle in some sort of great room. I don't know what it was, but it was a big area. And it's kind of sloped because dirt and things have kind of filled in that area.
Okay.
And there's about, I don't know, 15, 20 of us sitting there. And as we're waiting, we were there with a guy named Dave Schrader. I don't know if you've ever heard of
Yes,
him.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, we're there with Dave, and Dave is sitting over there. And about that time, it's a beautiful day. And about that time, a wind came up, which is not unusual. Here's a wind. No, it increased. It had increased and then created a dust devil
Okay.
right there in the middle of all of us, right? And it was getting big. I mean, this thing's like 20 feet. I mean, it's a big dust devil. This is 60-mile-an-hour wind probably or more. And I'm standing there. Yeah, I'm standing there
Everybody
freaking
doesn't
out.
know.
I'm going, finally, I got to Transylvania, and Vlad knows I'm here.
Yeah,
Look at this.
that's what it looks like.
He's sending us a signal, and about that time, Dave Schrader stands up, throws his arm out to the side, walks into this dust devil, and starts screaming, I shall smite thee with
Oh,
my vengeance. And everything.
and you're like, wait.
I'm like, yeah, I was going to have a paranormal experience, and you just ruined it.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
like this is
He's
this
like,
doesn't
yeah, that's a
happen all the
dust
time.
devil. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's
Yeah,
you,
it's
you
true. It's
ruined.
it's it's a lot of people go to these places and it's kind of like, okay, historically it's like, oh, interesting, but that's about it.
Yeah, he just completely sucked the life out of
Your
my
moment.
thoughts. Yeah, I was like, wow, really? So anyway, that's
But,
uh,
but this is the thing. I mean, I think nowadays if you go around there, I know that they make, and I don't blame them. They've built like a tourist kind of industry around it. Money wise, but
yeah.
people don't realize that in that part of Europe, especially, they do, and for hundreds of years they did believe truly in vampires. It wasn't like
Oh yeah.
you know,
Actually, there's small groups of people that still believe in them.
yeah,
And the funny thing is Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler,
mm-hmm,
Dracula, whatever you want to call him, is vilified in the United States.
right,
He's a hero in
yeah,
Romania.
yeah.
He is like,
He repelled the Turks. Sure,
yeah, he's like George Washington. Not quite George
yes,
Washington, but I mean, he's that well liked, and
yeah.
everybody. It's like, yeah, he wouldn't have been violent if you just stay out of his backyard. All you got to do
Well,
is, if you're from another country, don't invade my country.
Well,
Otherwise, I'm going to kill
and
all
a
of you.
lot of people, warfare being what it was, but especially back then, which was pretty savage. But part of what I
Uh,
heard was that he was also trying to do like a psychological warfare against the Turks being that savage because it was like,
sure. Yeah,
I'm going to make you so scared that I'm willing to do this, even though, life
that's
wasn't worth
exactly right.
anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's incredible what people, but I've heard of what they call in that part, Poland and also in Transylvania, Romania, what they call those deviant burials. I mean, in other words, everybody always thinks of Dracula as being Count Dracula or the Prince Vlad, but they found what they call deviant burials where really older cemeteries 400 or 500 years ago, they've opened them up, some of them, and they find some of them with certain things like across their neck or on their hips,
Oh
which
yeah.
is the equivalent of pinning the corpse to inside their coffin. And
Right.
they believe that these were people that the community thought were either vampires or they were afraid that they were going to rise from the dead. So there
Yep.
is absolutely a belief in that around that area.
Yeah.
Even though we
Yeah.
think of it like, who's going to believe that? It's like, yeah.
Well, when you've never been to school and you don't know how to read, and the only thing that
Yes.
you believe in is what your parents tell you, what your priest tells you, and what your community shares with you. Other than that,
Yeah. Yes.
it's kind of hard to base something in what would be considered fact when you don't have any method
And then
to
it,
logically
but
work it out.
But you know what? The good part about this, and I'm sure that you, as a writer of fiction, always thinks, okay, that's the logical explanation, but what is there is truly, which is like what Bram Stoker kind of did. Like, is there really any
Sure.
truth to all these folklore? Like in
Yeah.
that, and then we go down that, you know, the it's not folklore in the end.
You're right.
But
We were in Whitby, England, I guess a year ago or thereabouts, and there's a bench that overlooks the sea there, and that's where Stoker sat and imagined. When the
right,
Demeter ship ran
yes,
aground,
uh
that's where
huh,
he imagined it. So I'm sitting there looking at all that and remembering the passage, and it's like, wow, it
yes.
was just an incredible place.
Yeah,
Incredible. It's one of
when
my
people
favorite
get that
places on the
moment
planet.
of inspiration that turns into that, I don't know what you want to call it, their muse, whatever, where because I've read some of his other short stories and they're pretty good, but let's face it, Dracula is Dracula, and of course, you
Yeah,
know, so many things have sprung from that. Even Twilight.
right. I know. Oh my God.
But what I'm saying is, like, it's so different, but at the same time, really, its roots are Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you're going, so you're doing all these travels, and did you ever have any experience when you were going through these countries or some of these places, maybe if especially if they were really ancient?
So the most stark experience I guess I had was I was in Alaska. I was in Kodiak, Alaska, going through a pararescue class. And
Okay.
so we spent about 3 weeks in the water there in Alaskan water, which is about 32 degrees, 33 degrees, right above freezing.
Yes.
Um, but so we're swimming and doing all this stuff, and I go through the school, and then I have that was I got out of there on a Friday, and I had to be back at Fort Richardson on Monday, and I
Okay.
had like $210 with me or something. I don't know what it was, and so I decided that I wanted to go to Three Saints Bay and
Okay.
there, the first Russian colony there. And the only way to get there is to get a Alaskan Uber, which is you just go to the closest airport and find the least drunk individual
Oh
there
God.
and to fly you
So
someplace. Yeah,
reassuring. It's like,
yeah, it's beautiful. And so I paid this guy like $25 or something to fly me from there to um, uh, Old Harbor, which is where they moved Three Saints Bay, Alaska, when the typhoon, there was a tsunami that came in and destroyed the town in the 1700s.
okay.
And so they relocated it to a safer anchorage. And so I flew in there, and it was really weird because when I got out off the plane, I had about a quarter mile to walk into town, and I'm walking along, and you imagine Alaska, it's these big tall trees and beautiful
Right.
water, and you're walking through the woods, and you come around the corner, and there's a giant blue dome, and it's a Russian Orthodox church sitting there
Wow.
from the 1700s. Yeah, it's just crazy, completely out of it
With what you're
didn't go
gonna
with the
expect to
landscape.
find.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I go there, and I had read about a massacre that happened to the Aleut people up there. The Russians had the Eskimo and the Aleut didn't understand, gunfire, and so they fought one type of warfare, and the Russians fought a different type of warfare. And the Russians would come in and kill everybody or take them as slaves and that sort of thing. And so this big village went out to a place called Refuge Rock, and it's about 300 yards off the coast. And they went there to. That's where they would go whenever they were, under fire. But they didn't understand cannon, so the Russians lined up boats on either side and just killed all of them, or a majority of them. Anywhere from 300 to 3,000. There's some pretty good accounts of some anthropologists that went through there in the early 1800s and took some accounts of what happened. So I talked this fisherman into taking me across to an island called Sitkaladek Island, and I got off there, and I could see Refuge Rock from there. So like I said, it was about 300 yards off. And I really can't logically explain what happened after that, because I got to spend about 8 hours out there. Okay. And they wanted me on that rock, and that's all I can tell you. I can't explain my experience other than I knew I was supposed to be there.
Okay.
And it was profound. It really was. And while I'm sitting there, I decided I'm gonna see if I can swim out there.
Oh,
now I didn't have, I had a dry suit on when I was in, going through the school. But I was thinking, I think I can do this. And of course, you and I both know there's no way I could have done that. And so I'm looking at it, and there's like a little land bridge that goes out there. It's about 3 or 4 feet underwater. Okay. And I don't know whether it almost looks like to me that the Native Americans there actually built that so that, it would be submerged, but you could actually,
right,
go out there on maybe low tide or something. And so I made it, I don't know, about maybe 70 yards into the water. And I started thinking about how cold it was. And I started thinking about the other animals that are in the water out there. And I'm all by myself. This wasn't really smart. And so I failed in my quest. I didn't have the courage to go ahead and go on out there. And I don't know how to explain it. Other than, you see those movies and, some spirit or something controls somebody and makes them do something really stupid.
I was about to say, it sounds almost like for a moment there, you kind of like lost your, when somebody it's like, oh, I've got to be there. I've got to go there. And it's like,
yeah, it was like that. But like I said, I really can't explain it better than that. But I'm going to go back there one day.
Did you ever do more research on this place?
Oh yeah. It's they've actually they've made it a national refuge now. You're not allowed to go on there's from the 1805 account of a Dutch explorer that went through there. He interviewed some of the people that survived that, and the mothers were taking their children and throwing them off the cliff so that the Russians couldn't take them as slaves.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just, there's bodies all over that place.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, I'm going to go back there one day, though. I am.
I had not heard of this place. And see, that's what I like. I like to go or hear about places like this, which have this history, but are not like everybody and their second cousin have, you hear about it. It's like, okay. Because you kind of get like a regurgitated history that a lot of times is not really accurate. But this sounds like a really interesting place. And
I've had a lot of, some of my editors and stuff. I was like, why don't you write something mainstream? Like, write something about Amityville or, I don't know, Lizzie Borden or, something like that. And it's like, they've already done all that. Right. There are stories out there. There are personal stories. I was in a graveyard today. I was driving along, and there was a graveyard I've wanted to look at, and I thought, well, I'm going to take my lunch break and I'll go over there. And it's Roberts Hill, and it is literally it's all undergrowth and trees.
Okay.
It's not cleared out at all. There are tombstones scattered everywhere. It was pretty amazing. Anyway, so the reason I wanted to go out there is there's a couple of Texas Rangers that are buried out there. Okay. And I wanted to go see if I could find them, and they were real easy to find. But
really?
Literally, I mean, you could barely see. You had to push your way into the cemetery. It hasn't been taken care of for I would guess 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just completely overgrown.
Yeah,
but it was pretty fascinating. And so, there are stories there.
I
There's
bet.
stories about those Texas Rangers. There's, right across from there is the old Platt farm, which those people they went through horrific things. And there was a guy named Wilbarger, Josiah Wilbarger, got scalped, and the guys that were with him got killed. A couple of them got away, and when the guys came back to the platform, they told him what happened. They're like, "All right, well, he's dead. We'll go see if we can find his body in the morning." That night, his wife woke up and said, "No, Josiah is awake. He's alive. You need to go get him." And they're like, "No, he's not. Go back to sleep, woman." And so they get an argument, and they go back to sleep. And she wakes up again because she keeps getting this vision, right?
Okay.
So in the meantime, Josiah is naked. He only has one sock on. He's stuck full of arrows, and he doesn't have any hair.
Oh
He's
my
been
God.
scalped. Yeah, and he's crawling along, and it's night at this point, and his sister walks up to him and says, "Josiah, you're hurt very badly. Stay here. I'm going to get help." And he says, "Okay." So he stays there, and he leans up against this tree that's there, and she disappears off into the night. Well, once the Miss Hornsby, Sarah Hornsby, she's the one that's having this vision. She wakes up her husband and says, "You have to go get him. He is alive. I'm telling you." So they get on their horses, they go out, and sure enough, find him there. They
Wow.
pick him up, take him home, and he lives like another 11, 12 years, something like that, with no skin on the top of his head. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So the crazy part is when he gets back and they nurse him back to health, he writes his sister because she lives in St. Louis, and come to find out that she died the day before
Oh,
this
what?
all happened. Yeah. And so it's as a detective for me, it's really cool to hear a legend and then to
Yes.
actually get the letters from the family, or
Oh,
be
you
able
were
to
able to
look at
get
the
that?
letters. Yeah, yeah, look at the
Wow.
letters from the family where you know Miss Hornsby was writing. This is what happened. And
Right.
then you put the puzzle all back together, and you're like, wow, was it? And as a homicide detective, there's this saying that there's no such thing as a coincidence.
Exactly.
And and so, I try not to, like I say, go too far outside of a realm of logic or what I consider scientific materialism. I try to figure out the causation of whatever it is.
Right.
But stuff like this, you just sit back and
It's
go,
like there's no way that he could have. I mean, it's like, and it's incredible because
yeah,
he was, you could say, well, he was delirious and he thought he saw his
yeah,
sister for
yeah, of
whatever reason. It was
course,
in St.
yeah,
Louis, but she's dead. And it's,
yeah,
and then he has this other person who's convinced that he's alive.
yeah. So, like I said, there are so many intriguing stories like that everywhere.
Yes.
And most people gravitate to the fantastical, or the really popular, like I said, the Amityville kind of thing. When man, next door, there was
Yes.
from where I live, 100 yards from me, there's a Tonkawa graveyard, an Indian graveyard that
Yes.
nobody knows about. Well, I take that back. The Parks Department in Georgetown knows about it, but
Exactly.
nobody else really pays any attention to it.
Yes.
And
People
they
don't
just keep,
realize that, and I tell people, because especially if you grow up in an urban area, and of course by the time, you've got your established cemeteries. But I say a lot of times when towns or cities or wherever, when they were growing up, sometimes they would have what I called unofficial graveyards, where especially if they had workers or transients or people that they didn't know what to do with, they would just say, "Yeah, over in that corner, yeah,
right?
bury them there." Then people forgot, that there's basically like a small graveyard, in a certain area because they didn't have any. Nobody was going to spend money to even put up a marker, and if there was, it was
That's
made
right.
of wood, which within a few years is gone.
Well, in this area that I was in today, a huge area. had no markers at all, but
Yeah.
depressions where all the graves were.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. But I'm going to go back to that place and do some
Yes.
more research on it. It's just absolutely amazing
Yeah.
graveyard. It's took a lot of pictures.
I had one. I did one not too far from where I live at. And what happened was this was around right after the turn of the century here in South Florida. And the way it worked was, back then they had segregation even for cemeteries, and there was a lumber company, and they had workers, African American workers, and they didn't have a place to bury their dead. So the owners of the company asked Masons, a Masonic lodge who had a piece of land, if they would allow them to do that. And they did, and they used it from like 1919 to like 1955. And then after that, it fell out of disuse, whatever. But now if you go there, all you have are the plots. In other words, most people do not know that this cemetery's there. And
Right.
there's only like two markers, which were for two veterans from World War I, and of course they were made very well made markers, and that's why they were there, and a couple more. But there's a slew of people buried there, and maybe some you'll see, like you said, where the earth falls in, and you've got like that indentation, but that's it.
Right.
But there's
Yeah.
no official entrance that it's a cemetery or anything like that. Nothing at all.
This Roberts Hill Cemetery in Austin has a bunch of people that fought in the Revolutionary. I mean, not the Revolution. The when Texas seceded from Mexico, and there's a lot of those graves there. There's a lot of World War One, like just what you said. I mean, I can't explain it. It's like in a jungle. I mean, this is really
Yes.
grown over, and there's these beautiful tombstones,
Mm-hmm.
that are military, veteran tombstones. Says what unit they were in, and
Yes.
it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no,
But
these the two veterans that were, I found their records, their records. As a matter of fact, they had served in France, and they served in I guess in a division. I hope I'm using the right word, of civil engineers, which were like equivalent to like firefighters, and both of them had gone off and fought in World War I in France. And I was able to locate their records, of course, with it's military records. But otherwise, most of the people that are buried there, that's it. And that's what happens. Family members move away, they die
yeah,
themselves, and that's it.
yeah,
So
there's a lot of those
a
around.
lot of history. But I'm gonna bring you real quick, because especially because of the work that you do with police work and Amityville. The one thing I always ask myself is, why didn't anybody hear those shots?
Yeah, I don't know.
I That's the one thing of the whole story, and I know that there's been a lot of versions, and I'm talking pre the horror part, the
yeah, the
supernatural part,
Luxes, yeah,
the
before the Luxes,
actual
yeah,
crime,
yeah,
where I can't. And the reason why I say this, that there was I want to say, was it in the 70s? They had one they called the Easter Sunday Slaying, which was a guy, one of these family annihilators, that he wiped out his mom, his brother, his sister-in-law, and all their kids. Like, he slew everybody on a Sunday during the day. It was Easter Sunday, and the police showed up because like 2 hours later he called them, and he lived in a suburban residential area. And I was like, what is this? I can't believe that nobody was thinking, is are those multiple shots? What is that?
right.
And that's one of those, I want to say, borderline supernatural things, that it's like, what happens to the noise of when this violence has taken
Yeah.
place?
Yeah, inside the house, it's going to be muffled pretty good, but you're still going to hear it outside. And unless you muffle it also with a pillow,
Right,
that'll take up some of it. And then most people, they hear a couple of things and they just don't think anything of it. I
right,
don't know.
right. And that's usually because, I mean, we do it. You hear something and you're like, "Was that a shot?" But you think of all the other things it could be. But then I'm thinking, okay, when you have these multiple shots, like if for example that guy, he killed like 10 people, and what's his face, DeFeo, killed what, his whole family, like six, 7. in the middle of the night, and I was like, doesn't anybody think after the second or third shot, it's like, wait a minute, that sounds like a shot. To me that there's
Right.
something there like, okay, it's very weird and unusual sometimes where things like this, they just, you would think nobody's paying attention, or I don't know, just even out of curiosity. Because I'm thinking, where is that nosy neighbor that everybody has on their block? You know, that person that's always looking around and making sure who's doing that what. And I guess it didn't exist on those neighborhoods.
Yeah,
So
and neighbors solve crimes.
yeah,
I can promise you that. That's who solves crimes. The cops show up, and they do interviews and stuff like that. But it's the neighbors that are paying attention that step forward and solve these things. But a
yeah,
lot of
well,
people don't want to get
it's.
involved, and
I
I don't
mean,
know.
I'm always thinking, because I mean, I agree. You stay out of each other's business as far as neighbors are concerned, but at the same time, you always think, if I really see something unusual or hear something weird, I'm gonna look and see what's going on, because you, you know, even for my own personal safety, even if, let's say, if you want to, but I guess it has to do a lot with what's going on, and or what people expect to hear. I guess most people
Yeah,
don't think that their neighbors are getting massacred inside their house,
right.
so they don't go
You're
and.
hoping they're not.
No, no, no. Or
Yeah.
it's. I think it's a bunch of different circumstances that contribute to that. So, and when you went into, and this is the thing, when you went into police work, and I know that, especially if you imagine if you did homicide, that you go to, I guess you have to put on your objective, it's just the facts, ma'am, kind of hat on. But have you ever had any weird experiences or seen anything at any of these scenes?
So probably the weirdest one it was not a homicide. It was when I was working as a mental health officer.
Okay.
But I found it interesting because 20 years later or so, I talked to a medium, and she told me some things, and I was like, that's pretty amazing.
Okay.
But so what happened is I was what's called a CIT officer. It's a critical incident
Okay.
team, and I was a negotiator, hostage negotiator, suicide mediator.
Okay.
And so I get called. This woman has her baby, and she's holding it over a balcony and on the third
Oh.
floor of this apartment complex. And
Oh.
she's got postpartum depression. She's just lost it, man. She's just
What?
completely lost it. And so the uniformed officers are all there, and she's threatening, screaming and holding this baby over. And, so there's guys below her trying to figure out how to catch the kid with a sheet and all this stuff. So I pull up and I get out, and I'm in plain clothes, and I walk up, and it's like on the third floor, so it's got these switchback stairs going all the way up
Okay.
there, and they're open on the side of the apartment complex. So as I get to the second floor, she sees me out of the corner of her eye, and she looks at me. And I'm walking up, and I get to the third floor, and she takes the baby over the railing back to her
Okay.
and embraces the baby, turns and walks. And I walk into the front door and to the sliding glass door where the uniformed officer was.
Okay.
And she sticks her baby out and just hands it to me. And I take the baby, and I turn to the uniform officer, and I give it to him, and I'm going, take her down. And I turned around to this woman, and she gave me a big hug and everything. And so we hugged, and we walked down, and I went and put her in the back of my car and took her straight to the state hospital, right? And no conversation at all. I didn't ask her what her name was. I didn't do anything.
Okay.
And it was just a very odd thing. So I put her in the state hospital, put her on a 72-hour hold or whatever it was called then.
Okay.
And so couple of maybe a month and a half, 2 months later, I was up in the state hospital, and I had to go through one of the wards to interview an escapee.
Okay.
And as I'm walking through the ward, there she is, and she stands up and she starts crying and kind of laughing at the same time. Oh my God, you're here. And she comes and gives me a big hug again. And she says, you're an angel. You are an angel. And she's looking at me, and she's looking at my back, and she's like looking around. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, you were an angel. You had a halo. You had huge wings. I knew you were there to
Wow,
save me.
Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was really cool. It was a really cool thing.
So you finally
So,
figured out why she just like was so docile
yeah,
and
I
gave you the
had no
baby.
clue of what was going on. I was just
And you're
flowing
like,
with it,
wow.
man. That's one of the biggest mistakes cops make is they ask too many damn questions and they won't shut up. They'll keep talking because they know everything. And so if
She
cops
ended
would
up
just
staying there, I
shut up
guess.
for
It
a
sounds
minute
like
and
they
listen.
committed her.
Oh yeah, yeah, she was in the state hospital on medication for a long time.
Okay.
But so a few years later, I'm doing a book signing with Fiona Broom. Have you ever heard of her?
Yes.
Okay, she's awesome. I love Fiona, and she's written what the Ghost of Austin, the Ghost of Boston, the Ghost of Seattle, these different
Uh-huh.
really cool. Really, I actually use her book as one of my reference guides for a lot of the investigations that I do around here. Anyway, I was doing a book signing with her, and she goes, "So," I said something like, I haven't had that vision. I haven't had that experience. And she looks at me, she goes, "You're not going to." And I said, "Well, why?" And she goes, "Have you ever seen your aura? You have wings. You have a huge
Wow.
aura." And I'm just looking at her going, "Really? Okay. That's awful convenient." Now, so,
Wow. When you
so
get it from
I'm not gonna get to see anything because ghosts don't like me. That's what she said, and I've had one other medium say the same thing.
that is incredible.
So yeah, she was like, "You need to look at your aura. You need to get an aura picture. You need to do this." And I
But
did,
that's
and
good.
I didn't,
You know
just a
what?
big
As
orange
long as it's
blob.
if it's a positive thing, it's like
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm gonna go with it, whatever. And
Absolutely.
that's one of those things about the paranormal is people will say, "Well, I can't believe you believe in that." Okay, well, what did you talk to your priest about last time? So give me the scientific materialism
Right.
of that, of where the
Exactly.
evidence is on this one. And of course, I can point out everything, the flowers, that's an eyeball. Obviously,
Yes.
it's so complex that something would have to create it. It just couldn't grow out of the muck, which I believe. I, I, I should say I don't believe that we grew out of the muck. They might have
No.
used the muck to make us,
Exactly.
but something else happened. There's something pretty miraculous that's happened.
Absolutely. I believe so.
So
Whether whether you want to call it created, intelligent creation. I mean, if you don't want to go just with a straight evolution or with the straight Bible version, Adam and Eve kind of thing. I do think that there's some intelligence and intention behind us. And then you'll get the ufologists who say, yeah, we were hybridized from alien genomes or whatever. But
yeah, yeah,
even then, where do they come from? If you want to go with that theory, absolutely.
right,
And usually people that in this field, I say, if especially if sensationalism is great, but let's say you're not. Once you have that firsthand experience that you really can't account for, and you're not ready to jump to that conclusion immediately, there's a paradigm or reality shift that you think, if nobody ever believes me, I don't care because I know what I experienced.
right. And that's something that people have asked me, have you ever used a medium or a sensitive or a clairvoyant in any of your investigations? And I say, yeah, I've used them several times. And the real answer to that, because you'll have, detectives that will roll their eyes and go, "Oh my God, this got to know what he's doing."
Right.
Well, when you have a case and you've interviewed all the witnesses, you've collected all the evidence that you can, and you've, looked at your suspects, and you just don't have anything,
Right.
there's just nowhere to go. I can't get an indictment on this case.
Mm-hmm.
What is it going to hurt
What have
to
you got to
ring
lose?
somebody up and go, "Hey, man,
Right.
this is what I'm working on a case right now, and I wanted to take you over to this location and just let you walk around and see what you think."
Especially
And you
imagine
have
if it's something like a stranger, like stranger, like that maybe it's not, I want to say the usual suspects, the neighbor, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, whatever. What if it's a
right.
stranger that you have no
Yep.
idea to look at?
So I've done that, and the whole key to that is to make sure that you don't give up any information to the medium,
Mm-hmm.
but also you have to trust the medium enough that they didn't look in the newspaper and start looking
Right.
stuff up on the internet, because I'm sorry, folks, there are people out there that will screw
Yes.
you over and take your money.
Yes,
And it's
absolutely.
really easy to do. I had a cop that came up to me and told me about this experience that he had going to see a medium. He had had a critical incident 25 years ago that has affected his whole life. And he went to this medium and told me this miraculous stuff that she told him. And he was there, and there's no way she would know this. And so he's sitting on one side of the desk, I'm sitting on the other with my laptop, and I'm just typing in keywords that I was like, okay, so what did she know about you? Well, she knew that my name was, this, and that I worked at this location. And I typed that in, and the newspaper article popped right up of what happened.
Wow.
And he goes through this entire story of how miraculous that this woman is, just incredible and everything. And it's just her precision was spot on, right? She read the article.
Of course.
And I was I was leading to saying this, and I was going to turn my laptop around and show him. Hey, look, you told me these three things. I typed it in, and look, guess what? The first thing that pops up on Google is.
Yeah. I
But I
could be a
didn't do it.
medium right now, in other words. It's
Yeah,
just as good as her.
I I didn't do it. He was so at peace of what she told him,
Right.
and he was so amazed. I'm like, man, I'm not going to take that away from him. I'm not going to get into an
Oh,
argument with him. And I'm glad, it would be like me getting into an argument because your priest gave you some advice and told you some things and it made you feel better. What difference does it make whether it's a medium, even if it's a charlatan
right.
medium? If they're doing it, I don't know if that's
Right. And it makes you wonder also, Greg, how much he really, like, deep down inside knew it, for lack of a better
yeah.
word, subconsciously knew it. But it was like you said, it comforted him. It's like, I'm going to go with this version because, hey, I'm happier this way.
Right. Sometimes life is more interesting in the way we perceive it,
Of course.
and just leave it alone. Some of the
Yes.
the absolutely amazing things. There all these stories about the moon, right? Just the moon is this amazing thing. Well, and then we get astronomy, then we look at it, and then we get really close to it and get on top of it and figure out, yeah, it's a big rock. There it is. Well, that took all.
That's just so much fun.
I like the cheese, the moon, made out of
Yeah,
cheese thing.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a lot better. I like that.
Right,
So,
yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard of all the stories that you hear, like that when, there's a full moon and that people are crazy and that emergency rooms are overrun or more than usual because, hey, it's a full moon. Uh, and yeah, it and then you think, okay, how much of this is actual influence or people, even the crazy ones, believing or having heard of that as far as being
right.
influenced?
And then they're acting out just because they're
Yeah,
expected to. Yeah,
exactly.
I've seen
Exactly. You
that
don't know
happen.
which comes first, the chicken or the egg, as far as stuff like that. But yeah, yeah, and I like science. I tell everybody I like science and everything, and I think that'll. And I tell everybody, nowadays we have so much technology that's so rapidly advancing, and by the time you think you got something figured out, something new's come along, and I think that that's why we've got a big uh, thing with all these superhero movies that there's one coming out
Oh
every
yeah,
month because I think people after a while they still want, if they can't have the outright mystery, they want kind of the something that's not quite real. I think human beings
sure.
always need a little
Yeah,
bit of either mystery or something beyond what's that can be totally explained or quantified.
right. Or it might be even just hope to think that maybe one day the humanity can be like that,
Yeah.
I have the ability somehow inside me of that sort of thing. So
Well,
yeah.
and this is the thing, and I'm gonna I'm gonna do my little. I say, you know what? When before when you had superheroes like Batman and Superman, the original ones, they were like, of
Uh-huh.
course, they were do-gooders or they fought crime, whatever, whatever. But overall, they were considered normal human beings. Nowadays, these superheroes sometimes are very, very flawed. So it's like, who
Oh
wants to be
yeah,
a
yeah,
superhero? It's like, God.
yeah. I've often talked with a friend of mine, Sean Freddy, and that's kind of from the Norse mythos and the Greek mythos, as far as the gods from their perspective interacted with human beings, and they
Right.
screwed each other over, and they had sex out of wedlock, and they had
Yeah.
affairs, and I mean just all kinds of manipulation going on.
Very
So
human
yeah,
like.
it's yeah, yes, as opposed to a Christian view of angels, demons, God,
Yes.
saints,
Exactly.
and then the flawed humans.
Well,
But
and
yeah,
it's like almost like the, I mean, when you look at, I'm going to give you a perfect example, like Batman. Let's say Batman. Batman, I remember when Adam West, you remember when they had the TV series, he was like
oh yeah,
really straight arrow, Robin. And now he's turned into like a high functioning sociopath, the Dark Knight,
right.
This guy's that you're lucky that he's decided that he's going to do away with just bad guys because he's very flawed and mentally disturbed. And it's like, what happened to just Adam West?
Yeah, well, Adam West, yeah, he the TV show did certainly did not follow the comic books.
Oh
Let's put
no,
it
I
that way.
know.
They
I know
yeah
those
they
comic
they
books are a
brushed.
little bit darker.
I did the paranormal panels last weekend at Wizard World Comic Con here in Austin.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. And so we got to talk about how mythology, how lore affects society and affects our future and what we do and how we do
Okay.
it and our perspectives of it. And it was a great discussion. So
Well, no,
so
no, and I know that with the original comic books or with some of these later graphic novels that have come out, and I understand that, especially if it, you know, that I know that always there had to be some, like a lot of these stories, and even if you want to look at a myths, a lot of things spring from tragedy. You understand,
right.
because
Oh yeah,
this is the way to explain when stuff shit happens to you. This is the
yeah. I've
the gods were
learned
angry
best.
with you,
Yeah,
or they were jealous of you, or whatever.
I've
And I
learned
know a lot
best
of
from
these comics,
tragedies for
they
sure.
some of them more than others, and but sometimes I think they also swing though lately more in the direction of really dark. I mean, before there was the good guy and the villain, and now all of a sudden it's like, who's the villain in this, or who's the flawed one? It's like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it makes for more interesting. I've heard, and I don't know how accurate this is, that with a lot of the movies that have come out, that they do much better when they're made to towards adult audiences. Like, for example, Deadpool,
Right. Yep.
versus the ones that are kind of aimed more towards a younger audience. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Adults like this stuff too, but especially if the humor or whatever's going on as far as the mental processes is more realistic.
Right. Yep.
But yeah, that's also
And it's really funny when you talk to a lot of people that collect comics or study, the social aspects and cultural aspects of comic books and the influence on society and everything. It's real interesting on how different people have different perspectives on it. Disciplinarians, let's say somebody who's very religious, or believes in demons, or another person that believes in ghosts, another person believes in spirits or aliens or time travelers or dimensional shifters or
right.
whatever. And you look at it, and they all look at those things from their perspective, as opposed to, when you had done my bio, we talked, or you had mentioned that I study complex adaptive human systems, and
Right.
and that's one of the things I look at is how does the experiencer process and understand what happened to them.
Okay.
And that's something really fascinating because a person that is brought up in a very strict type religion will relate to their experience from that point of that religion. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be pretty out there for them to get outside of their religion and try to view it from there. But it's fun to look at, and it's fun to see how people.
Well, you know what, that example that you gave, you will have, let's say like, a person's perception is their reality, in other words. And of course that's why everybody has their own different reality, but let's say, like you said, somebody religious, something bad happens to them, some people will see it as this is the left hand of God. Maybe if they've been straying away from religion, let's say, for example, it's
Right,
like that's the left
exactly.
hand of God trying to help me get back into doing the right thing. Yeah, it's
Yep,
because that's
yep,
the way they were brought up to look at it.
that's right.
That's it's yeah, we're definitely, even though it's kind of weird, we're different, but in a way I know that the way that human beings think is almost, it's repetitive. uh, I had heard, and I can't remember the source, that they said that if you look at, let's say, the headlines for the news, and you take out, let's say, time or dates, as far as that, some of the bullet points for news from 100 years or 50 years ago to today, they're almost similar, very similar. If you take out
Right.
identifying features as to where, but it's almost like the same thing that,
Right.
we're hearing or dealing with, in other words. But
Yeah.
so, and when you do something, let's say as a paranormal detective, I'm going to go into, have you ever been asked to do an investigation having
Oh,
to do with the paranormal per se?
yes. At work, yes, and of course we don't do that.
Yeah.
There's usually a lot more stuff going on with whoever that is that's reporting this,
Right.
and that's something that I mean people look at differently. I mean, if you go to work for a large company and you have to get a some sort of clearance or whatever, they require you to do it. Let's say a personality evaluation,
Right.
and you do, let's say, the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory.
Right.
And that's what a typical government and a lot of large organizations will make you do, and it's a 500 or 600 question test, and you lose points if you ever say that you believe in aliens or seen ghosts or had experience. You actually lose
Sure.
points on
Sure.
your evaluation.
Yeah.
And so those are something that everybody tries to avoid, is some sort of stigma, and that's something whenever you say, people will go, so you're a paranormal investigator. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
I'm
like,
a I'm a paranormal researcher. I'm a paranormal explorer, and I
right.
look at it from a full perspective of being a detective. And I've had people go, well, what's the difference between a detective and an investigator? Well, it's all semantics, I think. But a detective, like myself, would have, let's say, 5 weeks of just interview training.
Right.
Now you're showing up every day, Monday, and you work till Friday, and all you do is look at how to interview somebody, how to interrogate somebody, and how to cross examine somebody.
Right.
And then in that, there's multi levels of that, as far as picking up cues of deception, and deception isn't always lying about the event. It could be they are trying to skirt around some evidence that would take the detective in their direction on a separate case.
Yes.
Like they're there for a robbery, but they've been smoking weed all day long, so they start lying to you initially because they don't want to be
Yeah,
involved
they're
because they're
worried about
high. Yeah,
something.
yeah, they're worried about something
Yeah.
completely different than the murder.
Yes.
And and you pick up cues of deception on that. It's like, okay, this person's lying to me, but it doesn't mean they're lying about the crime. It could
No.
be it could be some other deception that's going on.
Sure.
So I think a lot of that, as an investigator, uh, falls into credibility. It falls into, are you actually trained to do this, or have you just been watching,
Right.
Ghost Hunters International and decide that's what I'm going to do? There's, and I'm not picking on Ghost Hunters International. I could have named anybody, but
Right. No, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what
it,
you mean.
it matters your training, it matters your experience, and
Uh-huh.
it matters whether you're trained in actually doing research, because
Right.
you can find some things that appear to be credible, and they are absolutely not.
No, and
So, you know,
yeah, it's and I tell everybody one of two things. Sometimes you have people that's not that they're lying. In other words, they truly believe what they saw or experienced as what it is. It,
right,
it's because they believe it. It's not that they're lying. They truly believe it, even if what they experience has a rational explanation. When you ask them about it, they're as far as they're concerned, they're telling you the truth and they believe it's supernatural.
right,
Okay.
yeah,
Or and I tell everybody, when I haven't, you know, done, because I used to do a lot of the preliminary work on some of the investigations. I went out for a research group that just covered the state of Florida. I would tell them, I would always talk to anybody that had witnessed it or lived in the house. I would say I wouldn't go to another room. I would take them outside where they were absolutely sure that they were out of earshot of any of the other members, because you would be surprised what people actually tell you
oh,
when they're
yeah,
sure that they're alone and they can't be overheard.
yep. Yeah, and and I've been accused of being a debunker, and I'm not a debunker. But if it's
Mm-hmm.
not paranormal, it's not paranormal.
Yes.
I
Yes.
it has a lot to do with what is, as an investigator, what is my purpose? Well,
Right.
what is my goal? Is it to support the legend of a ghost,
Uh
or
huh.
is it to find out what is going on to cause these people to experience this? So
Yeah.
there's two different ways to go about it. And, a lot of people have hijacked this word skeptic,
Oh yeah. Oh
and people in
yes.
the paranormal world use the word skeptic like it's a four-letter word. It's a bad thing.
No.
Well, skeptic
I
is
tell.
floating around someplace between the word gullible and the
Yes.
word cynical.
Yes.
Skeptic is someplace there in the middle going, okay, based on my
Right.
experience and the evidence presented here, I'm going to go with this, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. And that's
And
and I tell everybody, unless you're looking for the sensational angle, if you are a paranormal investigator, researcher, whatever you want to call it, worth their salt, you set a very high standard. And before you start even going in the direction of this has got a supernatural origin, this is paranormal, first you're going to go through a checklist of normal stuff, as in pipes, the wind, the raccoon in the attic, and or do we have somebody that might have a mental disorder, a mood disorder, or is they taking drugs? There's a score of things that could account for what they're describing before you actually get to, okay, now we might have something here that is not of this world, whatever, and you take it from there. But I tell them, I personally, I set a very high standard because I have experienced what I call the real thing. So, no, I'm a worse skeptic than a lot of well-known skeptics.
well, and I skeptic is a good word, because otherwise you're a jackass or you're just gullible on everything,
Of course, of
and
course.
it's funny because there's some people. Michael Schwimmer is one of them.
Yes.
Is a great guy, but he's not a skeptic. He's a cynic, and
Yeah.
and because of the amount of research he's done and reading and all that stuff he's done and experienced, maybe he has the right to be cynical. I don't know,
Well,
but when he immediately rolls his eyes
yes.
when you bring up the word paranormal, right there tells me exactly what his agenda is.
Okay, but think this is the way, because I've seen it. He's invested in this identity that he's created, of this image of himself. He's invested in it.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
so if let's say, I'm not saying because I'm not there, but maybe if he ever really truly had any experience that he could account for, he'd be like, "Shut up, don't say
Right.
anything," because I've had all these years and this image and profile out there that, hey, like you said, I roll my eyes and it's all explainable, and all these people that are just thinking right away it's supernatural. It's he's got a personal investment in that, so.
Sure. And I think it's Michael Shermer, not Schwimmer. It's
But
Shermer.
I
But
know,
yeah,
and
he's
he's been around for a really long time.
oh yeah, and I love his TED talks, and I actually have one of the great courses I ordered and took that. And he had like 38 lectures or something like that on skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
And because I wanted to see where he was coming from, and he's got great examples of, you know, not properly interpreting the data,
Right.
whatever that might be. And also, people say there's a good example of what he gave an example of a red panda. It was in the Rotterdam Zoo, and this red panda got out of the zoo, wasn't in his enclosure, and they put this on the news, right? Well, there were hundreds and hundreds of red panda sightings everywhere. Come to find out, a couple of days later, the panda's still in the zoo, and he's actually dead, and he never left the zoo. Where did these 500 reports of red pandas all over
Oh, yeah, of course.
Rotterdam come from? And it's going to come from one. So some of them are going to come from hoaxers just playing
Right.
around. Some of them are going to come from people that are really looking for them, paranoid and looking for the red panda, and they see an orange cat run through the thing, and all they
It's
catch
the
is
red
his tail. It's
panda.
like, oh, there's the red panda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And but it was a fantastic study of how this happens. And people ask me this all the time, like, well, why would people lie to you about this? For a million different reasons, man.
Yes.
There's two types of lies. There's lies of commission,
Mm-hmm.
that I did something great or whatever, or lies of omission, that I didn't do or I didn't know about something. And so we had a serial murder, or a spree murder, I guess, here in Austin,
Okay.
20 something years ago. It's called the yogurt shop murders. And these girls were, the yogurt shop caught on fire. The cops went over there, the fire went over there, put it out, looking around in there, and there's some teenage girls stacked on top of one another,
Whoa.
burned to death, or just burnt to get rid of the evidence.
Right.
Well, in the subsequent year long, actually, this investigation went on for years. No one was ever convicted. Well, no one was ever permanently convicted of this.
Okay.
Some people were put in jail and that sort of thing. But the kicker was over 40 people admitted to doing it. And
I,
so why would a person that's not in jail walk up to the cops and go, hey, I killed those
yes.
girls. I caught that place on fire.
Yes.
We had over 40 of them say this.
Yes. Yeah.
So
It's
I
incredible
can't.
how many. Sometimes I think
Yeah,
that human's biggest fear, in some cases, being ordinary. Even if I have to admit to something like that.
you are absolutely right. And I'm not. There is stuff going on out there that I don't understand. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to find it, and I'll continue trying to find it till I'm there. Um, but that's just how things happen. That's just the way.
Yes.
I had a case where a prominent lady, business owner, you talk to her at the store, or at her business or whatever, just as normal as anybody. When she found out that I did paranormal research, she confided in me and told me about her experiences.
Okay.
And she told me that she was abducted. She continues to be abducted multiple times a year. The aliens come, freezes time. She can move, but nothing else in the world can move.
Okay.
And she sees the spaceships, and they do experiments on her and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I said, okay, so first thing we need to do is I can get you an MRI. It's not going to cost you any money.
Mm-hmm.
And let's get that done first. And she refused.
Oh, of
And I said,
course.
well, why would you refuse? Well, this is an ascension type thing.
Yeah.
This is a next level that human beings are going to. And so she just basically, I talked to her a few times after that, but then she just quit talking to me at all.
Yeah. You didn't.
Because kind of what you said, she would rather. So a, a
Right.
doctor,
It's
a regular person would sit here and go, okay, you're experiencing something mental going on. Let's figure it out. And
right. Let's rule out
she,
the.
yeah, she would rather have the thought that she is being abducted by aliens than that she has a brain tumor or epilepsy or
Right.
some other sort of thing that's going on with her. And like you said, people
Yep.
want to be a part of something. They want to be something special, and I get it. I want to also. That's why I work as hard as I do, so I can do these events and travel around and try to figure it out. I've done 22 events this year, and I don't know how many I'm going to do next year. I don't think I'm going to do so many
You know
next year.
what?
I'm going to cut
It's
back.
incredible that you mentioned that because I was doing some research on something else that I'm working on, which was because I have worked as a hypnotherapist, and you know I know that a lot of these alien abductees, they do regressions, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe me, I'm a subconscious behaviorist, and I very much know and understand the power of the subconscious mind. But anyway, getting to the point that you just said, it's incredible that just earlier today I was reading up on this, how they were talking about people that have recounted, like exactly like what you said, not only once but many times alien abductions. They said 80% of women will describe some type of sexual, where they were harvested, their eggs were harvested, and men 50%. And that they equate it during all these times that they say that they've been abducted, equivalent almost to a rape, even though it wasn't technically the rape the way
Right
we see it.
now, yep.
But they equate it to. But then afterwards, that sometimes they have, I guess, I don't want to say group therapy, but where groups where they've gotten together. Even though they feel violated, they still feel that they have this close bond with their abductor, ET abductors, if you want to call them that, because that they're there here to help and that they feel that they're part of something special. I'm like, wait, stop. Where does the part about being violated and abducted? And it's like that's where I have a problem with. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist because I really have no proof to say it doesn't, but there's something wrong with your psyche where abduction, possible rape, and it's almost like there's something masochistic in it, and you identify and you're special, like you said, because what's worse than that? Being ordinary. And by the way, ordinary average people are usually the happiest.
Yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah,
seen that too.
they are. They are. They are. Yeah.
Yeah,
What do I say? Anonymous and happy. Thanks. And when I mean anonymous, I don't mean nothing about being self-effacing or nondescript, but people, it's almost like if being anonymous or ordinary is like you must be so miserable, and I'm just like, not really. But it's incredible that you mentioned that, and I was doing a little bit of research on that, and I guess in a way to figure out, okay, of all these people, like you said, that have these experiences, okay, we'll pull out the ones that imagine that they've got something going on up here with their nut, maybe people that are doing drugs, blah 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 blah, where are the ones that really truly have had that experience, either one or like some of them described, sometimes starting in childhood and into adulthood. You know,
right.
it's I think it's just like think about it. I mean, if anybody thinks that besides the fact of being abducted, uh, that I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. I just think that there's something there that I'm still trying to figure out as far as how it relates to the way us as human beings think of these things.
Right. When I was in high school and I worked at Pizza Hut, and I was a assistant manager at Pizza Hut at the time. And I had hired this lady, this girl. She was like 23, maybe 22, 23,
Uh huh.
as a waitress. I was like 17 at the time, and I'm standing in the kitchen area between the prep table and the ovens. And she walked straight up to me from the floor, past the cash register, straight up to me, and had this look of absolute terror on her face. And This is before Poltergeist and all that stuff. And she goes, "They're here," really loud,
And
right?
you must have been, what?
Yeah. And I'm like, "What the hell?" And so I grabbed her hands, and she grabbed my hands. I don't remember how it happened, but and we're sitting there holding hands, and she just locks up like a stiff board,
Oh,
right? Yeah, and her eyes are bulging out, and she's just as stiff as a piece of wood. And she immediately starts urinating on herself.
oh
And
my.
yeah, and there's this puddle, and there's people standing at the cash register trying to check out, and I'm sitting there, they're looking at me, and I'm like, I don't know. And yeah, so I'm trying to get her to come to the back, but she's just stuck there, right?
Okay.
And so I'm trying to talk to, hey, are you okay? I was looking over at one of the guys. Yeah, call the ambulance. We didn't have 911 back then, and
Right.
so somebody's getting on the phone, and I'm talking to her, and then she kind of starts relaxing after a minute or so. It seemed like an hour, but it was probably a minute or so. She starts relaxing a little bit, and then she started shuffling. So I shuffled her back to the back and set her down at a little break table.
Uh-huh.
Went up there and tried to start cleaning stuff up and trying to figure out what's going on. I go back there and talk to her. She's smoking a cigarette back there. And, once she was able to talk, she said that it's been happening since she was a little kid, that the aliens abduct her, and they'll abduct her in the middle of the day, just like that. And they take her and do all kinds of horrific experiments on her and torture her, basically.
Right.
And then she comes back, and she's missing time and space, and doesn't know what happened, and exactly. And that was one of those cases where she did this another time there, and we sent her home, and I talked to my general manager, and he said, "Man, send her over to the doctor's office, and Pizza Hut will pay for it. We got to figure this out."
Right.
So she went over there, and I don't remember if it was an MRI or whether it was a CAT scan or whatever, but anyway, she had a big lesion on her brain.
Oh, I was about to say when you were describing that, was like, is she epileptic or?
Yeah, it was epilepsy. That's what they diagnosed her with, was
Okay.
epilepsy. But here's the question:
Uh-huh.
did the epilepsy cause her to have these seizures and result in this scarring on her brain,
Okay.
or did the abduction of the aliens cause the scar on her brain to cause the epilepsy? So you and I probably know what the right
Well,
answer is to that, but you can't necessarily eliminate the possibility.
but let me ask you, when she stiffened up as a board and she was urinating, is this the time that in her mind did she think that at that point she was had been abducted?
Yeah, yeah, she
It's
has the experience
okay,
while
she has the
while that's
experience.
happening. Yeah,
Except you were there telling her no, you were peeing. Okay.
yeah, you were standing right here. Yeah,
Right.
and she said, no, they take me,
All right.
and it's like, all right, well, I don't know, but that's what I always fall back on as far as the paranormal. Okay, so they diagnosed her with epilepsy. We have physical evidence that she has a lesion on her brain
Right.
in an area that would cause some paralysis and
Okay.
other problems. But was that lesion always there? Did she have an accident as a child and caused this?
Yeah.
Was there a disease that caused it? And are these experiences that she has a direct result of the scarring, or is the scarring a direct result of the abduction that she's experiencing, and the damage that the torture that they're putting in on her? So yeah, it's
And I mean,
I don't
she's
know.
it sounds like what she said she's having them since she was a child.
Yeah, yeah.
What?
And that was
It
like that would have been 1979, I guess, is when that happened. When she was working, 1979, 1980, something like that.
and you know what? It's and I'm going to give you, because one of the things that people don't realize is that there's a lot of people, depending on your suggestibility, that walk around hypnotized. And
Yeah,
I've spoken to some people that have described, what they call the missing time, like, oh, and I'm like, you didn't go anywhere. You were hypnotized. You know how people will say, I got home and I didn't know, I like missing time. I got there and I go, no, you were hypnotized. People don't realize that
right.
you could walk around and basically function and drive your car and be hypnotized.
Yeah.
especially if you were under some stress or anxiety, and depending what's going on with you, it's, I mean, there's a lot of variables with it. But where you actually forget, like all of a sudden, let's say you pull out of the parking lot at work, for instance, and the next thing you know, you're at home
Yep.
and you can't remember the drive. And I'm
That's
thinking to
happened to
myself,
me
there's
multiple
people
times.
out there that will say, "Oh, missing time. The aliens got me." And it's like, no, the aliens didn't get you. You were just really hypnotized. And what happened that were you anxious? There's a lot of things that will put you there, where exactly that. Like all of a sudden you're just like, okay, now I got to get out of the car. But that sometimes the way it's explained, but like you said, sometimes people, they want to see it another way.
Yep. Yeah.
But I can imagine you, as a 17-year-old, that must have weighed you out, something
Yeah, that
fierce.
was pretty bizarre. That was pretty weird.
Yes, absolutely. And you handled it pretty well, I'm telling you, because that would have been like, who's here?
Right.
But
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, no, I think that field, um is so interesting, but it's almost, as long as you kind of like, when there's a bunch of stuff around it, and you go, you know what, in the very middle of this, there's something that's very valid and real, but it's just getting through everything that looks like it before you get to the real stuff,
Right.
as
Yep.
far as,
It's a lot of distraction in the whole, breaking everything apart and trying to dissect
well,
what are the causes and what are the
alien
effects of it.
visitations, alien life. I mean, I mean, we could do, how much do we know about them? How much do they know about us? I mean, that's a whole different thing, because, and it's really funny because you'll get a lot of people that if you talk to them about paranormal ghosts, they'll go, absolutely not. But then you go about the aliens, oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, 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 and it's like, what?
That falls right back into what I was talking about as far as the disciplinarians, they just stick in their realm. If
Yes,
something happens in a particular way, they'll say, well, it's an angel or it's a jinn or it's
sure,
an alien or it's a,
right.
a helpful spirit or whatever it might be. But it comes back
Right.
to what your belief system is.
Exactly what you expect to see. What if aliens don't travel in the rocket ship? What if they travel interdimensionally? And
Yep.
maybe that accounts to, as to like what you said, an angel or a jinn or a spirit that, is there and then disappears. I mean,
And
it's,
and that's and that's something that I always found kind of interesting. So there's several people I guess that could probably be coined with this, but the father of the scientific method, Sir Francis Bacon.
yes.
Um, if you don't have to read a lot of you can just go to Wikipedia and look it up. But one of his foundations was in empiricism, and that imperii comes from the Greek word, and it means real evidence,
Hmm.
experiential evidence. In
Yes.
other words, um, he wasn't minimizing the physical evidence that you would have, but he felt that it was more important of what your interpretation of that the experience as you were observing whatever it was. So if there's a chemical reaction or whatever, in his mind, the chemical reaction was not the important thing. It's how you experienced the chemical reaction, processed it in your brain, and so that resulted in the word empiricism, and that's where I kind of fall. Michael Shermer would say pseudoscience if he heard me saying this, but that's kind of where I fall off of the wagon a little bit as far as being that scientific materialist. I fall
Right.
off the wagon a little bit, and I go, you know what? Maybe all this paranormal stuff is not about electromagnetic spectrum. Maybe it's not about voice phenomenon. Maybe it's not about whatever these things that we capture on video or on cameras. Maybe it's a personal thing. Maybe it's a human thing,
Hmm.
and maybe we're meant to pick up that stuff whenever we need to pick up that stuff.
Yes.
And it's not meant to be found by some gadget that you're going to buy online that has, red, yellow, and green lights on it.
Yes.
So
Yes,
That's
I totally agree with you. And I'm sure you've run across people that are not psychics or mediums, or they don't have a history of having paranormal or supernatural events, and then something will happen to them. This one event sometimes maybe has to do with family members. People have seen crisis apparitions or things like that. That it's that one isolated incident, and they weren't looking for it either.
right.
But
Yeah.
it's real, and it can't be explained by the normal things. And I think that happens to a lot of people, and a lot of them just don't ever talk about it
Right.
but
Yeah.
I think it's definitely part of the human condition.
I've had
Absolutely.
I've had people come up to me and tell, oh, you do this, and they will roll their eyes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. And then 20 minutes later, they'll go, I want to tell you
Uh-huh.
about this thing that happened.
Yes.
I had a guy, he's a multimillionaire. His wife is a chancellor on the board of an Ivy League school.
Okay.
And him and I sat there in his living room, and in which he had an Oriental carpet in his living room that's worth more than my house. It's just an incredible place. And he tells me about this experience that he had after his father died, and how his father came to him, and he thought he was alive.
Right.
So his father was in the hospital, and he was going to see his dad. And he went in the hospital, and he went to get on the elevator, and his dad got on the elevator with him.
Wow.
He's like, "What are you doing down here?" He goes, "Oh, I just wanted to come meet you down here." And so they're riding up in the elevator, and he's like, "Dad, you should be in bed." And he says, "No, no, I really appreciate you coming. You've been a great son," and blah, 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 right? So they have this experience in the elevator, and the elevator doors open up, and he goes to prop the doors open for his dad. He steps toward the door and holds it, and then looks back to where his dad was, and his dad's not there.
Wow.
And so, and I talked to him at length about this. Are you sure it wasn't a dream? You sure this? You sure that? He goes, "No, man, that changed my life." He's actually from the Philippines and was Catholic,
Mm.
and it completely
Yeah.
changed, because he had strayed away from the Catholic religion, but that brought him right back to Catholicism. And I was like, wow, and it was pretty profound for him. And for him to share that with me for no reason,
Right.
there was no, payoff on that. And that's one of the things that
Exactly.
when you're talking to people is just like, why would you admit to killing young girls and burning the place down? Well,
Yes.
why would you want to tell me that your restaurant is haunted? To get more people in
It's
your restaurant.
it's in like there's a lot. I think that there's for all well, especially I want to say what in the last 10 or 15 years where the paranormal has become more mainstream,
Oh
and
yeah,
I've run into where before people were like, oh, now it's like, I have a ghost. Great, really? What's her name or
yeah,
his name? And it's like,
yeah.
okay. I thought you were scared. No, no, really? It's like, okay. But um, but I think that there's a lot of people walking around, like you said, that have had maybe one or two isolated incidents, if that much, or maybe at certain intervals in their life, and they keep it very quiet until they come and they speak to somebody who they think is sympathetic and will not make fun of them, and of course that they feel that this
Yeah.
person will keep their confidence, and then that's when you hear those stories like what you just described.
And that's one of those things I look for whenever I'm doing an investigation on some place that already has a legend kind of thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Driscoll Hotel in Austin is the haunted hotel in Austin. That's where everybody goes. It's absolutely fun. I mean, it's a beautiful hotel.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is there's a painting of a girl, a young girl, probably six, I don't know, 4 or 6 years old, 8 years old, something like that. And it's in the wall, or it's mounted on the wall. It's a beautiful oil painting. And the lore behind it is that was the daughter of a girl that fell down the stairs and died there, right?
Wow.
So that's her painting, or the owner of the hotel commissioned it to in memorial of her, right? Yeah, did the investigation on the painting. Came from Europe. Doesn't have anything to do with this hotel.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
the thing about it is you don't want, facts to get in the way of a good story. So, you
Right.
find that out and you go, you know what, this isn't hurting anybody. This is a little ghost story. Fine.
Exactly.
Let's just move on.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no. Absolutely. A lot of things get embellished and made up, and and I hate to say it, especially if there's money to be made in tourism.
Oh, yeah. Well,
But
no. And the thing about it is telling a good ghost story has a value to it. And people pay me to tell ghost stories.
mhm.
And now what I won't do is I won't falsify that I have something that supports that story.
Sure.
There's a story in Westlake Hills, Texas, called the Ghost Wagon of Westlake,
Okay.
and I look at it and I'm like, okay, the story is in the 1960s. There were some kids down at this creek. It was in November. It was kind of cold and it was foggy right there at the creek because the water was warm. And they saw this team of horses, a wagon with a guy on it and a dog and a big bale of cotton in the back of it, a big pile of cotton in the wagon going through here. And it became apparent to them as it went through the fog and then it disappeared, right?
Okay.
So I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, that's an interesting deal. And then I look at some other stuff, and a couple of years later, still in the 1960s, the same kids are down in that area and they actually found a skeleton
Ooh.
and called their parents, and their parents came down there, looked at it, and their parents said, "Yeah, we know who this is. This is Maurice Moore. He was a cotton farmer that got killed by some Indians out here." So they
Wow.
covered up the. What's really cool about this is on a road called Campcraft, and it is sitting right in front of Campcraft Elementary School.
Okay.
And the whole front parking lot of Campcraft Elementary School is a graveyard.
Wow.
I mean, it's like you have to drive around the graveyard to drop your kid off. It's this little bitty, like family plot graveyard, but that's
Right.
where this was, this is early 1840s or so. The
Okay.
Eanes, the Eanes family moved into that area. And so they were burying people there. So that's not a big deal. So we got, the ghost wagon that was seen, and then we have this skeleton that's real close to there. And
That is a great
it,
story. I see. I love that when that story that it's like, yeah, it could have been urban myth kind of deal, and then it turns out
right.
that there was that person that existed.
Well, and the interesting thing is I knew who Maurice Moore was. When I read this, I was like, well, that's not Maurice Moore. I know where he's buried. He's buried in Oakwood Cemetery. And it would have been
No.
right about the right same time. So Maurice Moore was a deputy sheriff and former Texas Ranger and was married to the school marm of the Eanes School District, which was about 50 or 60 yards from this location I'm talking about.
Okay. Wow.
So the McNeil brothers had come in and burned the schoolhouse down because his wife wouldn't entertain them. And so, yeah. And so he was at his office and received a letter. He was at the sheriff's office, and the letter was addressed to the sheriff, but the sheriff wasn't in that day, so Maurice opened all his mail. And in the letter, it was the McNeil brothers' father saying, "Hey, my boys burned down the schoolhouse. We want to make this right. We'll build a new schoolhouse and everything. We'll do whatever we got to do, but don't send Maurice Moore out here because my boys will kill him." And Maurice Moore read this. It was like, "Oh, really?"
Oh
And
my
so
God! Talk about the
he
wrong
jumps
person.
on his horse and he rides out there with another city marshal. It takes him a whole day to get out there, and they end up assaulting the house before dawn. And Maurice Moore gets shotgun blasted right there in the door and gets killed. And
Wow.
the city marshal ran off. And so that wasn't Maurice Moore that was buried there. So I look a little bit more, and guess what? There was a guy that was a cotton farmer that got killed there, but it wasn't by Indians. It was by some highwaymen who killed him,
Wow.
dumped him there, and then rode his equipment into Austin and sold the horses at the livery and went and ginned the cotton first, and then sold his wagon horses at the stables and livery, and they were never caught. So the crazy part about the whole thing is this legend, this myth
Uh-huh.
is true, or it has truth to it.
Yes.
And so from my perspective, like I said, I'm not a ghost hunter, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I consider myself a detective. I consider myself, I've been trained to do a lot of interesting things, I think, when it comes to investigations.
Right.
And so, I do the non-sexy stuff. I'm the guy that's sitting at the historical society going through
Right.
old
Yes.
newspapers and stuff like that. And I'll spend 90 or 80, well, maybe 90% of my time doing that. And then only, 10 or 20% of my time actually at the location doing, an
Right.
assessment of, what's going on there.
Well, you know
But
what? And
anyway,
that's the thing. Some stories are well known, but I tell people, you know what? A lot of times that, I'm going to go, let's say, with the haunting and the haunting of a certain location house. These are the unknowns. These are people that maybe were servants. These were people that were unknown, that didn't make the history books or the newspapers or anything
oh
that
yeah,
documented what went on there. Or in that case, you don't, you don't think people sometimes got killed and buried at midnight and nobody knew any
oh yeah,
what
yeah.
happened to them?
There's
And
no
it's like,
cameras, there's
yeah,
no
that is the guy that's
GPS.
haunting.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's, believe me, there's a lot of stuff, especially nowadays. A lot of crimes went first either undetected or, and of course, unsolved,
oh yeah,
and a lot of them are fodder uh, for ghosts. If you want to say violent, sudden, uh, death with no resolution. There you go. You got them all three. So yeah, a lot of time, and it's really funny because um, I was doing some type of research on some stuff, and I came across so many gruesome stories. True, by the way, that I wrote a book about it. My second book was about that. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about these really horrible murders that I had
right,
never heard of, and I was like, "Oh my God, these are so horrible." We always think of more modern times when you have what we now call serial killers or these really horrible murders, and some of them got solved and identified. Somebody prosecuted. Others, nobody had any idea. And I was looking at stuff that was maybe like 80 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I never heard of this, but this is, God, this is really bad.
right,
And it was like, and again, there's so many things that unfortunately that human beings do that, maybe back then they made the papers for like a week and then that was it. And it just
right.
becomes a forgotten thing.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that there's something that happens, I think, uh, with human beings, as far as our self awareness and our soul or our spirit, whatever you want to call it. That I think whether it's because you don't know you're dead or if you are, you're just not happy about what happened. I mean, there's a million. I think absolutely there is. Absolutely there is. You
Yeah.
know, and I've had my own personal experiences, but what I'm saying as far as because nowadays everything you want to, everybody wants things proven. Um, but yeah, there's more to us than just when we take the dirt nap. There's some of us I think that stay behind and it's like want to make their presence known.
Something's going on. I know that.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, Greg, I wanted to thank you so much for spending this time with me. Let me ask you, do you have any books in the works? Anything new any project?
I'm actually working with Rosemary Ellen Guiley on
Really?
a project right now. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm very excited about. We haven't figured out a title for it yet, or what we're going to exactly the direction.
Okay.
But yeah, so the one that I'm still trying to get out there is the Detecting Paranormal book,
Okay.
and people are always asking me, well, where can you get it? Well, the best place to get it is off my website, which is
Okay.
theparanormaldetective.com. So,
Right. Okay. And
and
I
I,
am going to put a link to the in the credits of the show, but and I'm glad you mentioned it for those they're listening to the podcast version of the show, as far as, and I absolutely, I tell everybody, yeah, sometimes they'll have books in Amazon, but usually your best place to the jumping off point is the website, because I imagine is do you send out any autographed books, Greg? If somebody,
Yeah, it typically comes from the distributor. It goes
okay,
through them, but I mean, I can do that.
okay,
The problem is with my book, I have some photographs, and it's a pretty lengthy book,
okay.
and so Amazon with their discount just kills me, man. And
Yes, I
I
know.
get like 17 cents per copy or something if it
Yes, I
goes through
know.
Amazon.
I
So
know.
I can't do that, and it's not worth it to me.
I
But
know. They but or they can catch you. Are you going to be going to any cons?
Yeah, so October 6th is my next one is Utah Paranormal Expo. It's going to be at Fort Douglas Ballroom there in
Okay.
Salt Lake City, Utah. And Chip Coffey's going to be there. Andrea Perone is going to be there,
Okay.
and I can't remember who else, but that's going to be cool. And then October 12th, Strange Escapes on Mackinac Island up in Michigan. Amy
Mm-hmm.
Bruni, I'm going to be doing an event with Amy Bruni and Adam Berry up there of
Okay.
Kindred Spirits.
Yes, I've seen
November,
their show. Yeah, that now they're
November.
showing Kindred Spirits on the Travel Channel.
Yeah, yeah, they're kind of excited about that. They're
Yes.
happy about that. And then I'm going to do History and Haunts and Legends in Jefferson, Texas. And if anybody comes to Texas and does anything like that, Jefferson is the one to do. It's really really cool. It's an old west town, and it's got great history. And then the last one is going to be Hunt the Town in Haunted Bryan, Ohio. That's going to be with I'm going to be with the Ghost Brothers up there and the Tennessee Wraith Chasers, and
Yes.
yeah, and the Rip Files. So they're going to be there too. So
Yeah.
it's going to be really. I get to uh, uh, Dalian Spratt with the Ghost Brothers. We're getting a rental car in Detroit, and we're going to drive up from there. So it should be a
Let me tell you
really
something. I was at
interesting
Scarefest
three
last year
hour
in
drive.
Kentucky, and I met them, and they're, yeah, they're super interesting. There's a lot of people out there that, and they've got a new version of the show that they're doing as well now. As far as where they're going, I believe they were doing a live version. Is the last thing I saw.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things
But
going on.
so that's yeah, that wraps my year. At mid November, I don't do anything again until
Yes.
February. So I'm going to be doing an event at the USS Lexington with the Clean Brothers in February 1st of 2019, which is going to be really cool.
Yes.
That ship is incredible. So
Absolutely. Well, Greg, thank you again so much. It has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you, and I wish you the best of luck in all your projects.
thanks, and you too.
Take
Thank you a
care.
lot.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
So, guys, yes, isn't he interesting, God? He is. Okay. I love it when I speak to somebody like that, because when you do the type of work that he does, you have no choice, but you have to deal with facts, because this is what you deal with. This is what you owe. If you've got somebody that's been a victim of a crime, even if it's not a murder, and then of course your credibility has got to be 100% if you're going to give forensic evidence at a court hearing, anything that comes with it. So absolutely, you deal with facts and evidence and stuff that can be proven, and providing that, let's say, to district attorneys or whoever's going to bring that case forward, because let's face it, sometimes the evidence that's gathered and the investigations done by the police officers are what determines sometimes if somebody's ever prosecuted, for example. But then you have the flip side of it, which is he has this background, his own these personal experiences, and what I really like is that you could tell that he keeps an open mind. And by this I mean, because you get the people, like he said, that are so gullible, they'll believe anything and everything, even outlandish, even stuff that is like, wait a minute, aren't you gonna just think about it and realize that maybe that's a little bit, implausible, or or what motivating this person. And then you get, of course, the other ones which are like, absolutely not, forget it. You're a liar, and everybody's a liar, and you're all crazy. The beyond the skeptics, the ones that even get to the point that they insult anybody that says that they believe in the paranormal. And I like his approach, which is I'm going to keep an open mind, uh, and in other words, look at whatever is being described with a fresh set of eyes every time I encounter it. And by this, yes, you do develop experience, and uh, or you have a backlog of, I've been in a situation like this, or I've seen something similar to this, or what this person is describing. But you always leave the door open for, this might look like this other case, but it might be totally different, or it might go in a direction totally different. Or, I mean, and I'm sure that serves him very, very well when it comes to, uh, whether, I imagine, whether you do fiction or nonfiction or the paranormal, because it gives you, I don't know, I want to say, especially in this field lately, where sometimes it feels like, some stories are told and retold, or haunted places are visited and revisited by everybody, and it's like what he said, what he described, that story about what was going on in this town, and what it turns out was, what it was really, somebody had been murdered, that cotton farmer, and it's like, that's what I like. I think that's what really lends true validation to stories, that then when you do the research, and I'm into the research, it's like, wait a minute, you know what, this is an urban myth, this really did happen, this person really did get murdered. So these people, or these kids, whoever saw this, who had no idea, wow, this sounds plausible, whether it was a residual thing or who knows what. I absolutely love those stories, because I just, after a while, when you get these places that is like, oh God, that again, another team going there, another show going there, it's like, and it's like very formulaic. And I'm not going to say always, but sometimes I've even taken the trouble to do a little bit of research, and a lot of what they claim is not even accurate, or not true at all, at all. But it sounds great. Like I told them, hey, if there's money to be made with tourism, and by this, absolutely, don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist, man, make money. But sometimes, man, talk about, they don't stretch the truth. It's like, or massage it. It's like totally made up. And when it comes to the paranormal, I really truly appreciate when they tell stories that are based either in fact, or leave the door open and say, you know what, we might not know who this was. Or like he said, this portrait in one of the most haunted places there in Austin, this hotel is Driscoll. Turns out the portrait is from Europe. Hello. And you know what? You find that a lot. And somewhere along the line, some owner, some manager, somebody, maybe it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, said, you know what? This would be a great hook. And we put up this picture of this beautiful girl up there. But you know what? We're going to give it a backstory. Romantic backstory, very melodramatic, mysterious backstory. And there you go. And the next thing you know, everybody believes it. Everybody buys into it. And it becomes part of the haunted tale of that place. So, yeah, that's the part where you sometimes, as a paranormal investigator, you have to be skeptical. That doesn't mean that maybe, yeah, that there is some girl haunting it. For all you know, she might have been the maid that was emptying out the spittoons, and she's the one that's haunting the place, not the beautiful girl in the dress with a portrait on the wall. A lot of things happen. But anyway, guys, I hope you like the show. Like it, subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms, so you get notified, of, any new shows when I release them. I just, even though this show's probably going to be a little bit staggered, I just did come back from Toronto. I finished filming a new paranormal show that probably is going to hit the U.S. I imagine either beginning of next year. Beginning of next year, I'll give you guys more information on it, but it's great new angle, great new show. And I was asked to participate in it, and I'll tell you guys more about it as it gets closer, or, I'll give you a heads up on it. But yeah, there's a couple of new shows coming out, paranormal themed, that are going to be really, really, and like I said, I'm always looking for the new paranormal angle, because I look at all the paranormal shows. I look at all of them. I don't care how campy or cheesy they are, because let's face it, when you're in this up to your earlobes. And like a lot of my guests have said, the ones from way back when, when there was only In Search Of, or Sightings, or all these, you know, one in, there was just that one show, and then of course it's proliferated. But yeah, I watched them all, and I think it's I even dug up some shows. I want to say they were like from the 70s. There was one called Ghost Story. Some of these things that they were like, they're not supposed to be true. They were made up. They were like a weekly show, like Movie of the Week. Those of you who were around back then, uh, and some of them, you see these really, really, really young actors when they were starting out, and they had some pretty good storylines. Some of them I had even forgotten about them. But anyway, guys, again, you're one of my true believers. Don't forget to send me your stories. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, and you can go to the Submit Your Story tab, or you can email me at marlene@MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I'm still working out on the going live and on an internet radio station, and being able to get a phone number out there to get calls from you guys direct. I'm still working on that. What can I say? It's just trying to find the right format, the right place, and people behind the scenes that are going to facilitate it, so that I put on something. And then of course, but it's coming along. It's coming along. But anyway, guys, I hope again that you come back every week, and you get to either see or listen to the show. If you have any suggestions, or if you have any requests for anybody that either has been on the show in the past and you really enjoyed it and would like to have them come back, or somebody that you would like to see me interview, please let me know. For all you know, I've already got a long list of guests that are lined up, okay, which are super exciting, just like Greg, okay, involved in some aspect of the paranormal, whether it's ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot or eerie experiences, or just everything that's going on. Believe me, there's plenty of eerie stuff that's going on, despite all our modern technology and advancements and all that's going on. That in and of itself brings a bunch of other things that I've got some interesting shows coming up on it that you'll go, huh? Okay, guys, thank you again. You're all wonderful, and thank you for spending this time with me. Take care.